All right, time for weekly outlook. This one's gonna be a simple one, and I know looking at a TPO, looking at a daily chart, looking at just being part of last week. I think we noticed some of the weakness that we saw across some sectors and some of the indexes and sort of the divergence we started seeing. And I guess some of the macros start to get involved a tad. We'll keep playing the chart and we'll keep watching levels. It's just the most helpful, right? Just like know where we are up against prior value. And sort of the balance areas we've established the past past couple weeks and whatnot. So start off with like a weekly or daily chart here, but we're still like riding this upper band. I believe this is the 2 or the 2.25 standard deviation, the one I like using. Both on ES and NQ, kind of like just riding this upper band, right? Especially from this like last pivot low or so. Starting to ride that a little bit. Right, this was a week that we sort of expected some kind of downs or maybe a potential rejection. We're right back at it and we continue pushing. Maybe it's time to sort of like get going towards like the ones that we have anchored to this most recent pivot low. It might be a little bit of a stretch, but we'll see. We have the 20-day not too far below us, right? It's been a pretty decent pivot point in the past, especially on the ES, this 20-day. Wouldn't mind a pullback to it. I'd rather see us just continue this break of the inside week that we had last week. Right, we had an inside week here, started the break of it, and yeah, so I would like to hold this multi-week balance that we've sort of established here, at least the upper end of it, and sort of keep going. That'd be the easiest, I think, going forward or going into this week. With the divergence though, ES, NQ, the Russell, a little tough, right? Russell had a little bit of strength end of last week, and really just because the rate cut odds went up, but I really don't think that's a good idea for risk assets in the long term. But anyway, this is where ES is at. Ended up within last week's upper distribution. NQ failed, right? We kind of started the chop early Wednesday, Thursday, and then Friday gave that upper distribution up, worked back towards last week's lower distribution and held for now. So the goal, right, we'll just use ES for this example, is like, okay, what do we do up against this value? Okay. NQ is sort of same thing, but we're gonna have to take that a little different approach. Can buyers trade back into value? Right, to avoid trading back down to that 20 EMA. So this is what last week's composite looks like, right? Most of last week's value established at the high. There is something going on at the highs. Let me turn on the ETH. We had this excess on this gap higher, that opening drive that failed. The next session did end up working back towards the highs. The following overnight session even made a new high, but then again you come into RTH and get slapped down. So we're leaving excess up here, albeit some poor highs or weak highs. It's never really something we want to see as bulls. It can sometimes signify an auction at the highs coming to an end, right? Just some longs getting short-term long liquidation, right? We're just lacking new initiative buying when we come up into the highs. Is what it seems like. So I am cautious of that but the 20 days not that far below. It's like sitting at 6,400, right? Sort of down at last week's lower distribution. It's sort of this like high volume node down here, right? So yeah, I would not be surprised whatsoever if we have to trade down there. It is going to be a level that buyers want to defend on NQ, sort of the same idea. Although they have like one main distribution here, although you can argue you got like two, three little balances here, but this is like most of your volumes being traded. Right at that upper end of that shelf, right? Is sort of where that 20 days curling up to. And then they started to try and establish some balance up here, but kind of failed, right? So it's a matter of, okay, can buyers find acceptance back to this and resume the push higher, or do we have to maybe slow down a little bit, get a pullback to this, and then see what happens here, right? If we find acceptance back into this, if sellers can get back into this, I think it becomes a bit of a problem. Is it possible that you keep the pattern of these important lows, these higher lows, like ongoing? Sure. But I think it becomes tough if we can't defend the 20-day. So just keep that in mind. I think this goes for both ES and NQ. Okay. In terms of levels, right, we have last week's main distribution up here. I've sort of marked off the lower end here where it starts to taper off. This point of control up here and this uppermost shelf, right? This, I want to say like 15-point range-ish. So we'll see what happens RTH and how we work up against these two edges here. I think those will be the most important for ES, at least to start the week. Right, obviously failure below, acceptance below. I'm gonna, as a buyer, I'm just gonna be patient till I see down into these levels, see some excess form. I'm not in a hurry to be like a limit long down here, by the way. I'd much rather just see regardless of whether it's aggressive or non-aggressive, I'd rather see us like knife through it or something. Leave that leg, leave excess at lows, establish maybe, let's say, the rest of the session back above, right, and establish some value back above. That would be like ideal scenario for me to get long again, and swing long. But otherwise, this is sort of the area I'm looking for that initial buy reaction, at least like the closest one. Below, I'll probably have to think about it again. I'm not. Yes, we have levels here. I'm not eager to be like heavy long up against them. I'm willing to give it time and wait for some form of confirmation before initiating longs. Okay. So you have that on ES and Q. Like I said, they're sort of between last week's two distributions, right? We had Monday, part of Tuesday here. That lower distribution defended on Friday on the leg lower, but we'll see what it, if we have to revisit it or not. Back above this like 23,900, I think long's just back in play, and we look for new highs. Otherwise, like I'll be patient for the pullback into the 23,400, 23,500. So, I'm willing to take it day to day at this point. And we'll see what happens. I know the Russell really got moving on rate cut odds increasing for September. I know it came down a tad as expected. I really didn't think it should be a 99% chance we're going to be cutting in September. I think it came down into the 80s. I don't think we have data this week that skews this really, so we'll see what goes on, but we'll still be watching levels with this 2270s being the most important for them to defend. For over Friday's main distribution, I think we just immediately start to be bullish to the Russell to start the week, and see if we can get a test of these highs, or maybe even clean up some of these singles and whatnot. Yeah, so we'll see what happens. Equities, not really looking at much, not really looking at new positions. There are a couple, like very few long-term names I'm maybe potentially looking to get into. That would be win. They look pretty darn decent if we just look at it from inception. Right, kind of up against this decade-long trend line per se. Recently got a bit off of this shelf here, trading sideways for about a month and a half. So I do like the idea that we are holding that, and I think I'm just gonna get long leaps and equity. Just a good place to put my money because I haven't really had a really good place to put it. So we'll put it into that. Some key things to watch this week. I think financials. Actually, more importantly, semis. The weekly looks horrendous. Or at least where it closed looks horrendous. Yeah, we passed these last couple of highs. I don't like what happened at that last high, but the weeklies can potentially turn horrendous. If this keeps working lower, I would be cautious. The daily doesn't look too bad. Like you can still see those highs that we're trying to defend. We can maybe even give it a little bit lower. But yeah, I am a little. It's at a flipping point. You go lower and sellers can take control. Here, I think you're at that point where there's a key battle to be fought. Hardware is doing well and outperforming software, so I guess they got that going. But yeah, the weekly just looks horrendous. The daily looks fine for now. The weekly is starting to look potentially horrendous. So I am keeping an eye on that and sort of what we do, especially what NVIDIA does. Last week all they did was like trade sideways, marginally lower to sideways. There's still bid, right? But didn't go any higher. And financials, they also at a key inflection point. I think they're riding the 20, right? They're very, very close to the 20, struggling to continue making new highs. But they're right up against your 20. It's definitely slowing down to a degree. And once again, they're right at that inflection point, I think. So I'll be keeping a close eye on financials and semis specifically, and see if those have strength. I think I'm confident in my longs on the indexes day to day. So keep those on watch, and I think that's about it. That's about all I wanted to discuss here. So have a great week, and I'll catch y'all sometime this week.